I consider myself a fan of the Xenoblade series, and for a while I would say my favorite game in the series was Xenoblade X. But despite that, I never touched the game once the Switch dropped, and there were times since the Switch dropped that I went back to the Wii U. Now, Nintendo has re-released Xenoblade X for the Switch, but they also put out 3 other Xenoblade games. 6 if you count the DLCs and second stories as separate games. So does Xenoblade X still hold the title of my favorite Xenoblade game? Or is that just some sort of Wii U contrarianism? Xenoblade X can best be described as a single-player MMO, which is both a good and a bad thing. On the good side of things, the world is absolutely massive and there's great depth to the character customization features, but most of that customization is locked behind pretty tedious grinding. That's actually a really good summary of what I'm about to talk about in this video, so if you want you can leave now. Xenoblade Chronicles X focuses on the remnant humans of Earth. After the planet was destroyed in an intergalactic war, the survivors crash land on a planet they call Mira, with the remnants of the spaceship christened New Los Angeles, or NLA as most people will call it. You play as one of the survivors of the crash, and your goal throughout the game is to find something called the Lifehold Core, the most important piece of the ship that has gone missing. The planet Mira is absolutely immense, with 5 continents to explore. Like with previous and future Xenoblade games, there are strong and weak monsters scattered across the areas, but here it's taken to a great extreme. Across the first 3 intended continents of Primordia, Noctilum, and Oblivia, you'll encounter both extremely low and high level enemies, and to show this off, the main story will push you to explore these regions well before you'll feel confident about doing so. The final 2 zones shift things up a little bit with enemies that are all around stronger, but in one of those zones the enemies will generally not aggro on sight. The gameplay especially highlights this element right after you first leave NLA. You'll be tasked with kiting past some level 10 enemies who are probably too strong for you to take down at that point. And then as you keep exploring, you'll encounter a level 80 super boss who aggroes on sight and sound wandering around the same area. To combat foes such as said level 80 super boss, you'll have to engage in a very complex system of character building. On the most basic level, Xenoblade X uses a class system, although this begins to, for lack of a better phrase, fall apart as you keep playing. Each class gets a melee and ranged weapon to use, and once you master the final class in a chain, you'll unlock the ability to use said weapons no matter what class you play. Because the stat boost of each individual class is almost non-existent, odds are you'll end up going back to the beginner drifter class at the end of the game, thanks to it having an extra skill slot, which is usually more valuable. While your characters will auto-attack at certain intervals, each of your 2 weapons also have special abilities tied to them called arts, which are the main focus of combat. These arts can range from bursts of damage to buffs and debuffs, and when used, arts will go on cooldown. If you wait a bit before immediately using an art, it will go through a secondary cooldown, which if completed will grant additional effects. While you lack the ability to cancel auto attacks into arts like in Xenoblade 2 and 3, this re-release introduces quick cooldown, where you can immediately throw out an art of your choosing, or immediately charge up the secondary cooldown of an art. You can only do this so many times in a fight, but as you explore the world you'll obtain items called energy clips to expand the bar that determines how much you can use quick cooldown. Once you complete the new epilogue, you can even use quick cooldown while riding a Skell, although it takes much more energy to throw out an art on quick cooldown than a Skell. Speaking of Skells, these are the things that really sold me on the game. Skells are giant robots that you can fight and explore the world with. Skells don't get a secondary cooldown, but they have a much higher floor than on-foot combat. A Skell's arts are determined by what weapons it has equipped, and each frame has certain fields that it excels at. The first Skell you get is a level 21 when you'll be close to level 30, but it can easily carry you throughout quite a bit of the content from there on. In the post-game, Skells unfortunately require much more effort to upgrade for less payoff than on-foot combat, but they can still trash the game's ultimate super bosses, especially when built around a super weapon. The biggest key to the combat puzzle is overdrive, one of the most broken mechanics in any video game I played. As you fight, your characters will slowly gain a resource called TP. Once you hit 3000 TP, you can use this to revive a downed character, or you can use it to activate overdrive. For 25 seconds, overdrive will significantly reduce the cooldown of your arts, and by using certain colored combinations of arts, you will get various additional effects. This mechanic is balanced by not being explained well at all, but if you can teach it to yourself, you can do some really silly things in this game. Skells also get overdrive, but once again it isn't as good. Each Skell gets a slightly different boost in overdrive, and your art's cooldowns will also get reduced, but it's much more random if you can extend it or not. Going back to the story, I don't think there was a single narrative change for the first 12 chapters, which was and is rather mediocre, especially compared to the numbered Xenoblade games. However, this re-release adds in a 3-act Chapter 13. I found the new story to be overall extremely depressing, but this was clearly the tone they were going for. It's also plainly apparent that this extra story was not planned but ultimately scrapped Wii U content. It is an entirely new scenario. I won't spoil what actually happens, but it does make me excited for what the next Xenoblade game will be. There is good story content in this game though, and that's found within the side quests. Side quests can be found all over the place, and most of them eclipse the main story in quality. There are both one-off and long-lasting chains of quests, and there's great breadth to the tone of these quests. One side quest will have you reenacting Back to the Future, another will take place in a murder mystery plot with shapeshifters, one has you try to talk down a killer instead of fighting. There are even exclusive, challenging bosses you can fight within these side quests. There's also a side quest where you have to hunt down 100 plush lobsters scattered around NLA, but we don't talk about that one. While you'll probably be able to get through the main story just fine without a serious plan, things like gear upgrades and augments become essential for post-game content, and there's a ton of stuff to work through. This is where the MMO part of single-player MMO comes into play, and it's not a great experience. For both of these, you'll have to track down various materials dropped by enemies. Some of these enemies are unique encounters which can only be rematched in the time attack mode, where your power level will be diminished to put the enemy on an even playing field, and treasure sensor upgrades won't take effect. Thankfully, the quickest way to farm these things is just to hunt down material tickets, which can be quickly amassed by doing online missions with recruited blades. But there are also items called precious resources that can only be gotten through mining nodes. In particular, Bongelium is necessary for almost all endgame augments, and I believe each node with Bongelium has at most a 40% chance of digging up one piece per half hour of playtime. Meanwhile, it can take up to 16 pieces of Bongelium to create one augment. In addition, Bongelium can only be dug up in the most dangerous content in the game, meaning it will take quite a bit of playtime to even be able to start amassing this stuff. And just think, many of these craftable items have their recipes cut in half compared to the Wii U version. I'm able to tolerate grinding, as I proved in my Shin Megami Tensei Imagine videos, but there's one big differentiating factor between grinding here and grinding in a real MMO. There's nobody to flex to once you're done. There's no real way to show off your rare gear you rolled to other players except for the absolutely massive scale super weapons, most of which aren't even worth using in the first place. And even if there was a way to flex your hard work, there's not really a purpose to actually play with others. Online missions are generally best done solo with scouted blades, and Global Nemesis, the only mode that really incentivizes multiplayer, can still be done easily solo. The only thing that really matters in that mode is to drain 100 life bars before the end of the boss run, which a moderately invested in endgame build should be able to do easily. Finally, when scouting for high level blades, you're going to notice something curious. Just about everybody is running a longsword and dual guns, and their class will almost always be Drifter or occasionally Galactic Knight. This is because they are running the Ether Blossom Dance build, and it's arguably the most popular setup in the game. Why is this the case? There's a wide variety of builds you can put together, all of which are Ether based because of a certain overpowered skill. But for every other weapon class you have to farm weapons off of level 66 plus enemies, which aren't easy to farm, both in terms of difficulty and availability. Meanwhile, while the best longsword for the Ether Blossom Dance build is a random drop, the next best option is a guaranteed drop from a certain tyrant, which is substantially easier to grab. And surprisingly, longswords managed to get a pretty substantial buff in this version of the game thanks to Hercules' Blow, a new art exclusive to them that does massive damage with the potential to do even more damage based off your HP. I should preempt the comments here and say yes, most builds are viable in this game, but there's one specific playstyle that reigns as king, and every other playstyle is just taking more steps for a worse result. In the end, I would say that Xenoblade X is my favorite game in the series, mostly because it has big robots, and big robots are cool. In Xenoblade 1, the big robots were a bit too big. They were so big you walked around on them like a bug, and it was easy to forget you were even on a big robot. And in Xenoblade 2, the big robot was the final boss, and wasn't playable. I didn't really enjoy Xenoblade 3 at all, so maybe there was a big robot somewhere in there that I just didn't see, but in Xenoblade X, the big robots are playable, and I believe this is the first time in a Xeno game where this is the case, since Xenogears. And yeah, Definitive Edition is the best way to play Xenoblade X. So yeah, good game. Thank you for watching my YouTube video, and if you enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. I'm not too sure what the next video is going to be on. I could pump out something for Imagine since those seem to do extremely well for this channel, but I'm not too sure what that video would even be. I have an unfinished script of another series, and I think that would probably be what's going to be next. The only thing is that I'm not sure if I want to put it out on the game I ended up writing on or a different entry of the series. Look forward to whatever does come out though.